Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm here with DeeAnna. DeeAnna, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm DeeAnna Nagel. I am a licensed professional counselor in New Jersey. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in New York, but I live in Florida. So I'm not
Awesome.
currently seeing clients, although I do offer clinical supervision and supervision of supervision, and I
Hmm.
do a lot of training for supervisors.
Amazing.
And I have therapy courses. I have courses that are what I call in the pixie realm. Um, I love the woo, so I do a lot of woo stuff.
Ooh, okay, wait, what does that mean? Say more.
I'm a certified aromatherapist. I'm a Reiki master. I have a
Oh,
lot of certifications in the healing arts
yeah.
that I have ethically folded into my work as a therapist and a coach.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I
So
teach
cool.
others how to
I
implement
feel like
and
at some
integrate that.
point,
Yeah, yeah. So
amazing. Sorry, you were like glitching for a second, but
yeah.
um,
So my interests currently, I got my doctorate in multi-faith spiritual direction, which was way different than counseling, but complementary. And then I just finished a postgraduate certificate in neo-Jungian um, psychology.
oh
So,
my gosh.
and
Very
all
cool.
of that just kind of goes right into my love of writing. So,
Yeah.
and that's why we're here. So,
Amazing. I feel like we need to have you back on at some point to talk about some of these other healing arts because that's also like a whole world that we have
oh
not
yeah,
even jumped into on this podcast. And I think that I know so many therapists that are interested in that realm and some of the more woo stuff like you described. I love that. But today we're talking all about therapeutic writing,
yeah.
which tell me a little bit like what is therapeutic writing? What does this mean?
Well, when I first started doing it with clients, I didn't know it was a thing.
Mm,
Um, so, I mean, I've always loved to write. If I hadn't been gotten my undergraduate in mental health, I would have gotten it in writing, English. So that's just always been like second nature for me. And I used it therapeutically, keeping a journal,
mm-hmm,
writing poetry, which many of us do.
mm-hmm,
And so when I became a therapist 1,000 years ago, I would encourage my clients to journal.
mm-hmm.
And I would encourage them if there was a specific entry that they wanted to share with me to bring it with them the next time we visited. Um, and that just became a regular part of the way I did therapy with people.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I discovered that I could get some training. And so I did a couple of day training with Kathleen Adams, who has the Journal Writing Institute. I recommend her highly. Um,
Amazing.
and a lot of her work is based on James Pennebaker, who has written many books on therapeutic writing. Um, and I learned that journal writing is great, but as a therapist, I need to help the client understand how it can be beneficial and how it might
Mhm.
not be so beneficial.
Mhm.
So, um, and one of the ways it's not beneficial is if the journaling ends up being a repeat of the trauma, like
Sure.
telling the bad story over and over and over again in your journal instead of having any reframe of that process.
Hmm.
So that was one of the key takeaways for me from the training. And in the meantime, I probably circa 2000, which is 25 years now, I started talking about online therapy. And at the time, there was no Zoom. It was all chat and email. So, beginning 2000 for the next 20 years, I trained therapists across the globe on therapeutic online intervention.
So like chat rooms, like what do you mean by therapeutic online intervention if we're not talking
See,
about video
and
calls?
see, it's foreign to you now because now it's kind of outdated, which is wild to me. But anyway, um, for instance, I worked at an EAP, Employee Assistance Program, out of Canada. I worked there for about 4 years. I closed 1,000 cases, and each case gave us a a maximum of 5 email exchanges. Okay, so I get a client, I don't see the client, I get an intake form, they've already been screened, and we're on for 5 sessions. So by the time I completed 4 years, I had written approximately 5,000 therapeutic emails.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And in that time, I was teaching people how to use chat and email as either an adjunct or a standalone with their clients. And I developed my own process for how to create an email that is therapeutic, that that leads the client into a question that they're going to return with an answer, so that there's a pace to the process, there's a purpose to the process. Um, and so I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was some of the most powerful work I've ever done with clients. So I'm here to tell you the power of the written word is no joke.
That is so fascinating. And oh my gosh, I feel like we could go into like three different directions just based on what you just said. And so maybe can we start at journaling, and then I want to walk into some more of like the emailing and things that we were just talking about too, because I think that would be super beneficial. But starting at journaling, you said that there are ways to have your clients do this that are beneficial and not beneficial. You said some beneficial, some ways that are not beneficial if they're just kind of like rewriting their trauma without any sort of reframe. Can you tell me more about like how to help clients move more towards beneficial journal writing? I mean, I'm imagining clients are, I don't know, like when I was a preteen, I had a journal and I think I just like wrote everything that I did that day. And like I'm assuming we're not just talking about that kind of journaling. We're talking more about like process journaling. And
Right.
so tell me more about like how do we get clients to do this and like dig deeper in their journaling?
Okay. So the way I advise clients and students now is to use a journal prompt, right? So now I'm going to step into the woo a little bit, right? And it's not so woo because Carl Jung talked about it. So it's called active imagination. So if you learned about active imagination, it is the unconscious coming forward. And so a lot of times with my clients in session, I would say, okay, pen to paper, just empty your head. I'm going to give you a question or a prompt. I want you to write for 5 minutes. Don't lift the pen. Doodle, single words, complete sentences, whatever comes up. And then encourage the client to share with me what are the important points, the salient points of that process. That's one way. The other way is to give your client a journal prompt or several for the week. There are many, many journal writing books and journals available on Amazon that do just that. Um, so that's an idea. Uh, and then for me, I went a little deeper, brought in some somatic work, some subtle energy with essential oils, and I would do groups where I would pass around like lemon. Okay. Lemon essential oil is known for brightening, it's known for lifting the mood. And so we would all huff the oil, smell the oil, and then do the journal prompt and write. What I learned was that if I did it without the oil, what came from the client was usually very concrete, cognitive, um, intellectual thinking. And with the oil, it became more emotional, more soulful, more vulnerable.
That is so interesting. And you think it's just really kind of because they are starting to involve more of their senses, and so it's like
Absolutely.
bringing the experience together.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because when we inhale an essential oil, it goes straight to our limbic system. We have scent memory, right? We can imagine an aroma and conjure up a memory from that, right? So it can be very powerful.
Yeah. So, what are some examples of different prompts that you might give to clients who are in session with you in that moment, whether it be individual or group? Is it more of like write down everything thing that happened today, or is it like what are some prompts that you like to go to?
Okay, so a prompt I used recently, I have a restorative soul writing group that's online, and I just give journal prompts 2 or 3 times a week. So the journal prompt I used today was had a student that was talking about how she's, well, we just talked about it, but how she was crunched for time, like the deadlines, the time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. And so the prompt was very simple. In some indigenous cultures, time is not linear. So if time isn't linear, what time is it?
That's fascinating. So then it really does. Those are, I mean, that's a really good prompt. I think sometimes we see journal prompts that are like, talk about what self-esteem means to you. You know what I mean? And like those are nice, um but that one like even made me kind of stop for a second and go, huh, interesting. Like that's fascinating. What are some other ones that you like to use or that have you
Um,
used recently?
Another one would be, I use this one all the time because I'm going to brag for a minute, but it's in my Oracle deck.
Amazing. Wait,
And
did you write this or did you
yeah,
find this somewhere?
I wrote.
Okay. Oh, great.
So this deck, 49 cards, 98 journal prompts.
Amazing.
So one of the journal prompts in that deck is, and we're talking about root chakra, so being grounded, being rooted. Um, Imagine yourself as the cypress tree with roots going deep into the ground. How do you feel? And then the flip side of that, what we call the shadow side, is you are a tree with a very shallow root bed. What can get you more rooted?
I love that. I love that. What about for clients who have gone through trauma and are looking to do more journaling about it? I'll give you an example. So I have a client who really enjoys writing, but she um, is perhaps more of like a memoir type of writer, and I want her to dig deeper. I want her to be able to dive in more to like maybe less of the intellectual side. So, what are some tips that you would have for me guiding this client to kind of do more therapeutic writing?
So there's a gestalt process that I've used throughout the years that's, you can change the wording, but um, for instance, somebody that has an acquired disability, and they're struggling with the adjustment, of course. If your disability could talk to you, what would your disability say? And the same thing with trauma. If the trauma could talk, what would trauma say to you? If you didn't, if nothing ever, if nothing had ever happened, how would your life be different? And in coaching, those are called powerful questions. You know, it's not just a question for the sake of a question, but what's going to elicit that really vulnerable response, because that's where the healing is.
Do you find that people sometimes have an easier time writing these different things instead of just having to like say them back to you?
Yes, well, so some people love to write, some people don't, right? So this is obviously an intervention that works for people who like to write. So I preface all of this with, if you've ever kept a journal, or you like to write, or you long to write, this is for you. If not, then that's where symbols come in, right? Sand tray therapy, oracle deck, right? Not used as a predictive tool, but used as a projective tool. Like, when you see this image, what comes up for you? And they can either write it or express it. But what's interesting is, so because you'll see I go in and out of both worlds. Um, Years ago, when I was teaching chat therapy, which is asynchronous. I mean, synchronous chatting, just like in Messenger, except you're doing it in an encrypted, secure, HIPAA compliant platform. This was when online therapy had just kind of come on the scene, and everybody was, oh, we can't do that. Well, guess what? The pandemic happened. Everybody's doing it, right? But anyway, there was this whole thing about, if I'm seeing my clients, especially adolescents, they don't need to bring their phones into the therapy room. That's just distracting, all the things. And some of us were trying to normalize that. Like, no, this is part of their culture, their identity. You know, it'll be okay. And so anyway, during that time, I read a psychologist. I think this was in Psychotherapy Network or magazine. Anyway, she reported that she had that sort of feeling about it, like, oh, they don't need to bring it in. And she finally said, I decided, let's just see what happens. So she allowed her client to bring her phone in, and they were in the middle of a very intense conversation about something and immediately the client clammed up, didn't want to talk, which is not uncommon with adolescents. And next thing you know, the client picks up her phone and texts the therapist. The therapist gets the text and it says, you don't get me. So for that adolescent, the power of the written word enabled her to be able to say something she could not vocalize. And from then, they were able to have a conversation.
So then did they text back and forth? How
For a
did
little bit, and then she brought her back into the room, so to speak, like, okay, let's see if we can talk now.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So there's so many examples of how writing can just bring it out. You know, when I worked at the EAP, there were so many people who chose to do email because and when I say email, I don't mean Gmail. It was on a platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they chose it because they kind of wanted that anonymity. They wanted to be able to express themselves behind the veil, even though we had their name and we knew who. But there's just something very safe for some people in being able to work that way.
I mean, it kind of even reminds me of, well, two different things. Like, we see so many people using ChatGPT for therapy nowadays, or people who are messaging these AI bots. And it kind of reminds me of something similar, where you feel like you have this anonymity, you have this protection. And we're going to do a whole episode actually in the coming weeks about AI therapy. And I have like an ethical AI therapist that's coming on to talk more about that, because it's something that I feel like is very much in the news and kind of on all therapists' minds. But it kind of reminds me of some of the benefits that some people find in ChatGPT, where it's like they can, writing takes longer than talking. So you're like thinking about the words that you're putting on the screen, and you're reading it. It just feels like you're taking in the information differently, or processing it differently. And so I can see how it just kind of reminds me of that. But I'm also thinking of, I don't know, I think I'm one of those therapists, DeeAnna, just like full disclosure, that's like, chat therapy, like, I don't know about this. And I'll say, like, full disclosure, years and years ago, I was working for a nonprofit, and I actually got EAP benefits through a major mental health company, major tech company that has chat therapy. And I remember one day I was seeing this therapist. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I was seeing this therapist pretty regularly, like weekly or something. And she messaged me before one session one day, and she was like, "Hey, I'm not in like a HIPAA compliant area. Like, I'm not in a quiet private area. Can we do chat instead today?" And I just remember being like, "Okay." And then my experience with her was so poor doing this. And I think that part of it was that I wasn't expecting it to be that way. I was expecting to talk to her. I was like very tearful talking to her. on chat, and I felt like she didn't know that I was, tears were streaming down my face while I was like texting her. And I didn't feel like she was very tuned in to what I was saying or doing. And so I think like naturally I just have a little bit of like ooh, how does this work? Um, so I'm very open-minded though. I'm so curious about what you're saying about this. So I'm curious, like, how do you train therapists to be in tuned and really do this well?
So, how it works is training, right?
Hmm.
Just like we learn to be a therapist, we have to learn how to translate that online. The translation is not as tricky with Zoom, of course, right? There are some nuances, but that's pretty relatable and transferable skill. Online chat and email is a different animal altogether. It's not better or worse, it's different. It's a different way to deliver therapy. So the example you gave, my opinion is when we do not have some of the paralinguistic cues and the visual, the oral cues, our other senses kick in, right? So it can be a very powerful experience, but nuancing that experience is what's important. And that's learning how to demonstrate to your client in a chat or in an email that what you're wanting to emote or express. And when I was first doing this, it was before emojis, right? There was no all the smiley faces and all that. Um, so it was bracketing, um, and bracketing just means putting the word in brackets and saying holding space for you. Um, wow, that must have been really difficult. Some of the same reflective statements we make, but the way we do it in chat is different. Um, in 2010, which is now 15 years ago, I wrote a book on online therapy, and it was all about email and chat. The whole book is just about that. So, and now I teach a 6-hour course for therapists who not so much want to do it exclusively, but want to use it as an adjunct in clinical supervision. I use it all the time. I say to my supervisee, I would like for you to write me an email about this client. Write it to me. Because what they say and what they write, you get a different layer, you get a different dimension. Same thing happens with your clients. It's another lens. So you don't have to buy in 100%, like throw in the towel, I'm never doing Zoom, I'm always going to do email or chat, but it can be a very valuable adjunct. And I had a client in New Jersey that was face to face, and I remember distinctly one day she emailed me, same kind of thing. She said, it's raining, my kids aren't in school today. um, they're She said they're difficult to handle today, and I just don't know if I can get through a conversation. Can we chat? And so to me, I was like, of course, that I do this. But to me, that was me meeting the client where they were at. So if that meant we got to have a session and that was beneficial for her, two thumbs up.
Okay, this is just like a logistical question, but how do you bill for something like this? You'd have to probably do private pay. Like you can't do insurance with
There was
therapeutic.
actually, I'm not up on the insurance codes, and I went
Sure.
off panels years ago.
Sure.
Um, there was a code that we could use.
Interesting.
Um,
I should look into this more. Yeah.
yeah, but, and then for private pay people,
Hmm.
what I liked for myself with the flexibility was if I had a client that said, I just can't afford this anymore.
Hmm.
I would say, well, can you afford 2 30-minute sessions a month? We can do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah,
You don't have to drive to the office. We can do a couple of email exchanges. We can, so that kept the continuity going until they could come back.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. That makes sense.
So
Hmm.
it's just to me, it's a much more flexible way to work. Um, I'm not a fan of, I'm not going to name any companies, but the McDonald's version of therapy. Not a fan of that. I'm not really a fan of constantly being on the phone doing these short, that's not my idea of therapeutic writing.
That makes sense. I mean, I think that what I'm also hearing you say is that it really depends on the client, like
It
who
does.
works well for therapeutic writing. I mean, and yes, therapeutic writing, but also like who this type of chat email therapy works well for too. Like there's a certain type of person that that this really is beneficial for. Um, so I'm curious too, like if you are, I mean, who do you feel like this works well for? Are there certain diagnoses that you're like, I wouldn't see people with fill in the blank, or who people like people who are super dysregulated, or fill in the blank of
And
different issues, but
as a private practitioner,
mm-hmm,
whether I saw them face to face or online, they needed to have a certain amount of ego strength because I was just me. And it's not about my skill as a therapist, it's about my support system, not just theirs. So if I don't feel like the I can assist the client in a crisis and they're prone to crisis as a private practitioner, I won't.
sure, yeah,
If they have a fairly significant chronic mental illness and they are seen by their psychiatrist, that's not necessarily a no. It
mm-hmm,
becomes a no when I can't communicate with the psychiatrist,
sure, yeah,
either because the client doesn't want me to or because the psychiatrist is not available,
mm-hmm, yeah.
right? Because then I can't support the client.
Right, right. I mean, it comes down to like other supports then, and if they're engaged in the therapy and like
Right.
actually that makes sense. Okay, so then when we're talking about like chat email therapy, I have a different client who this made me think of, but I haven't seen this client in a few years, but I had a client previously who used to write me super long emails in between sessions.
Mhm.
And I actually like I at first I was like, what are you doing? Like this is taking me so much time to read in between sessions. And I was told by like previous clinical supervisors, just refer them, just say like, we'll talk about this in session. We'll talk about this in session. Um, and I do feel like it was kind of like a journaling for them. And so I didn't mind it as much as long as we had the understanding that like I'm not going to be reading this the same day, or I'm not reading these on the weekends. Like if at the very bottom say that you're in crisis, like there's not like I'm not going to be able to help you in that moment. And so I didn't mind that she would be sending me these long emails, but I guess one of the questions I had though was when you do therapeutic writing in this way, uh, is it more of like from noon to one, I will be emailing you back? Or is it really just like as the emails come in, you're emailing back, and it could be perhaps like over, a week long? Or is it more of like a during this short time we're emailing?
So you're spot on with telling her I won't be reading all of this, right? So I used to tell my clients, if you want to use me as the audience, absolutely, but I'm not necessarily reading it. So I would set those parameters up early on. And so they understood that they were using me as the audience. And if there's one in particular that you send me during the week that you want to process in therapy, we can do that. Okay. So that's how I handle that. With email therapy, if they sent me an email on Monday, they knew that within 48 hours or 2 business days, I would reply. I didn't have the same restriction on them, but they knew when they sent me something, I would reply within 2 days. And so in private practice, it went something like email number one. And then I would send it to them, they would respond, or they would send it to me. I would respond with email one. Then they would send me a response and I would respond with email two, because I would sell the emails as a package, like 4 emails, 8 emails. I can do a one-off, but a one-off is not going to, like, a one-off becomes advice giving to me. You get one email and they want you to respond. Well, I'm going to respond with a whole bunch of questions for you to ponder and journal about. So, yeah. So I kind of discouraged the one-offs.
Okay, this makes so much sense because I think that there's some boundaries here that we as
Oh,
therapists have
yes.
to be thinking about how to navigate and how to be compensated for our time. Um, can you tell me more about like how these packages work and also just like how like what if a client who is not paying you for this time emails you and is expecting these sorts of responses? What's your
That,
response?
well, that won't happen. If I just get an email out of the blue,
Mhm.
I'm responding saying, "Are you requesting services?"
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Right? Because
Hmm.
that's the whole process, informed
Yeah,
consent, all of that.
yeah.
So the way I charged for my emails is I based it on my hourly rate. Okay. But this depends on the therapist. I'm a writer. So what may take somebody else an hour to write takes me 20 minutes. So I kind of include the time it takes for me to read and process and respond. And usually it's a half hour. For some others, it may not be. And I'm not one that's going to give you 5 pages. You can give me 5 pages. I'm not giving you 5 pages back.
I appreciate that. And I think that even just what you said a minute ago, where you're like, you're not giving advice. It's not that she's sending you, this happened at work and I'm trying to deal with this. You're not giving her advice back. You are then giving her prompts back to be thinking further about what happened or how to process what happened or
Right.
um, kind of how to move forward.
Right.
That's a
And
huge difference. That makes so much sense. Yeah.
I may give some resources, or I may say, you mentioned XYZ. Here's a really good article that might be helpful for
Mm,
you. Um, and by the way, if you're going to do that, make sure you're using vetted websites. Like if you're
mhm.
getting any kind of like information on depression, Mayo Clinic,
Yeah. Mhm.
not,
Wikipedia.
yeah, not Fred's opinion.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah.
Reddit. Yep.
And with AI, by the way,
Hmm.
um, I think just as an education in therapy, AI can be a very valuable tool if the therapist becomes involved.
Say more.
Okay, so this is sort of like back in the day. My colleague and I um, would write and teach about avatar therapy and gaming, and our whole point was, I'm not a gamer, but if I have a gamer as a client, my gamer is going to be more likely to tell me what that means to them, the meaning making in gaming, if I'm open to hearing about it and maybe even open to seeing it. Like, can you show me? Think about the symbols and the all the things and the archetypes that come with gaming, right? I see the same thing, same process can happen with AI. Because first of all, if you want to get a really good response from AI, you have to teach AI who you are, right? So if you just ask AI a question and they have no that program has no information about you, you're going to get a fairly generic response.
Sure. Yeah. Hmm.
But if AI knows you, and especially if your writer knows your writing style, it becomes very real and very different. And it's like seeing a mirror to yourself. It's like talking to your higher self.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have
Right?
you seen clients use this well?
I'm not using it with clients because I'm not seeing clients at the moment. But if I did, I would be encouraging them to bring in, what tell me about this conversation you had with AI.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
What
Like,
advice did they give you? Yeah.
and what came up for you?
Hmm.
Because I do think there's again, it's the amount of ego strength the client has.
What do you mean by ego strength, though? You've said that a couple times. Tell me, what do you mean by that?
Ego strength is the ability to handle the next thing that's coming down the road. like just this is solar plexus stuff. This is self-worth. It's being grounded. It's not being taken off track by the big things or the little things. Okay, so depending on ego strength, which is probably a Freud slash Jungian term, um, AI could be very upending. Okay, so that's why it's important for the therapist not to go ew when they hear that their clients use, but say, "Oh,
Right.
wow, you want to have a conversation about that? I think that's fascinating. How's that helping you? You know." And then as they become more vulnerable with you, they'll tell you how it's not helping. And so before the mirror cracks, you have a chance to intervene. Or before they've decided that AI is their best friend, you've
Yeah.
had a chance to hear the story.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Fascinating. Yeah. Do you feel like, is there anything else about therapeutic writing that we haven't touched on yet?
There's probably tons.
Do you-
Oh, well, I will say this for just the client that maybe doesn't write a whole lot, but is interested in, the more psycho-spiritual existential client, what is the meaning of life client? I'm not sure what my soul's purpose is. Can you tell me? That client, right? I really encourage people to keep a synchronicity journal.
I don't know what that means.
So, synchronicity is a Carl Jung term. It's the meaningful coincidences. I'm sitting at the red light and I see 444 everywhere around me on the billboard, the license plate in front of me, all the things. Does that mean anything? What it meant is that you saw it and you were in tune to it. You buy a red car and the next thing you know, you're seeing red cars. There's not more red cars
Yep.
on the road. You're just tuned in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the more synchronicities you can track, the big and the little ones, in my opinion, that's a way of saying, the universe saying to you, you're on your path. Your eyes are wide open. You're paying attention. And it's the easiest way to increase your own intuition about your own inner voice. So they may not want to journal about what they did today or their trauma or take a journal prompt, but they might find it curious to track the meaningful coincidences.
Okay, selfishly, I like this made me think of a previous client that I had, and she is trying to understand kind of like where to go next in life. Like she's contemplating graduate school, she's contemplating career stuff, moving, like she's kind of just at this like crossroads in her life. But she's someone who I think could be a writer. Do you have any prompts or any like tips that you would have for like getting this client into some more of these journaling to process some of this?
So I would encourage her to get something like, not necessarily there's all kinds of card decks, but something like an oracle deck, something that speaks to her, and pull a card every day and just write a couple of paragraphs about what comes up. Or ask the universe in general, what do I need to know for today? You pull a card and you go, okay, that makes no sense. All right, okay, give it 24 hours. See what connects and what doesn't connect. And again, that's in the woo category.
Yeah, yeah,
But
but
I'm the practical pixie. So
I like that. I love that. Any other last thoughts before we close?
just, I think, really just appreciate the power of the written word. Yeah.
Are there any tips that you would have for therapists that are wanting to perhaps like do more journaling of for themselves
Um,
or therapeutic writing?
my blog is full of posts. You just go on my website and put in the search bar writer's block or writing or
Amazing.
journaling or,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll put a link to that in the description. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining,
Thank
DeeAnna.
you.
I have loved this conversation, and I really hope that I know that therapists will find a lot of value in this too, especially I think we all have clients who could really benefit from doing more of this. And I think that this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining.
I know we kind of went all over the place, but
No, good. No, it's good.
writing kind of crosses many gamuts. So
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone who's listening. Thank you for subscribing and joining us every week. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.